sometimes feel down, lost, or lonely? Are your finances feeling sluggish? Can your relationships use a healthy tune-up? Don't fear, bro. Help is here. Experience the benefits of connecting with other men who are going through similar challenges. Be supported in our safe, sacred, and inspiring monthly telecircle with the Brotherhood of the Illuminated Warriors. Connect with Waska for one-on-one mentoring with the first session completely free. What have you got to lose? Check out illuminatedwarrior.com or send an email to waska@illuminatedwarrior.com. You're invited to step up your game and join us. You'll be glad you did.
Hey there, everyone. I am Waska, also known as Perry Finkelstein, the founder and vision keeper of the Way of the Illuminated Warrior Transformational Men's Community. Yes, and it's great to be here with you all tonight.
Oh, that's awesome. And I'm Simran, and I am here to co-facilitate a conversation from the female perspective and in hopes that women will get involved in this conversation as we try to understand the line between the sexes and how to come together in communication and unity and companionship and all the ways that men and women are here to interact with one another. And I think tonight's topic is, what does it mean to be a man in today's world in 2021? That's a kind of loaded question, Waska, because not only do you have to describe what it means to be a man in today's world, but then there become all the diverse dynamics of race and age and economic status and work positions and all these kinds of things that I think men face that oftentimes are the subtleties and that we don't even consider, that go beyond just the basic conversation of what it means to be a man. So.
Yes. Very, very good point. And I do want to preface by saying, yes, this is a show for men and women about men, but this is really pertinent to all genders, all preferences. Just for conversation's sake, a lot of times we'll be talking about the, heterosexual relationships, but it really spans to human beings, So I just wanted to put that out there. So what is it to be a man in today's world? Because I do this work, and I've been doing this work with men for a few decades now. It's interesting would be a very easy word to say. I have 3 sons that I raised, and sitting with men in circle of all ages, it's I thought it would be a lot similar than it actually is now for younger guys in particular growing up. So it's a very hard question to answer, and I'm hoping that some of you guys out there that are listening will chime in with some questions or comments and share your feelings about this. And same thing with the ladies, if you have anything to add or have any questions, for myself or for Simran, please chime in and add to the conversation. So Simran, how do you want to start this?
I think we've already got a comment from Pete G, and I'd love to hear what he has to say because he's chimed right in.
What it means to be a man in today's 2021 world is like the third wave of feminism is actually trying to demasculate men and to remove the some sort of the patriarch establishment, or the patriarch, the men from being father figures, for being prolific people in business, prolific people in professional areas, just demasculizing men in general. Men, we don't get ribbons, we don't have parades, we don't have, nobody seems to actually care about men. And I think that's a thing that is a problem, because without men, there can't be life.
There's an interesting place of perspective, and I think that's the beauty of this conversation, is we're going to get to hear what men feel, because so often we do hear a lot about what women are saying and what they're feeling, and sometimes it does drown out the voices of the men, and I don't know that women always recognize that either. So thanks, Pete G. What do you have to say about that, Waska?
Yes, thank you, Pete. And I feel you, man. I feel you. I don't agree with what you're saying, but that's okay. That's why this forum is beautiful, and we're all entitled to our own feelings and opinions. Yes, without men, there could be no life, and just like without women, there who are considered the life givers, there could be no life. So it's a co-creative process. We need to walk side by side, not with the men in front. And the patriarchy, as you were saying, the patriarchy has been, quote, leading the way for a very long time. And, in my estimation, I don't really see that this way that we've been going for hundreds and thousands of years is really working for everyone. So I think we really need to find a happy medium, communication and compassion, and have the conversation. And I'd like to know specifically, Pete, why do you feel that way? Why do you feel that women are emasculating men? Because I'm sure a lot of women would have a similar comments conversely, like we don't get equal pay, we don't get the respect. I mean, I brought this up in especially in large venues. If I asked the women in those rooms to stand up and ask, and if they were able to really share how many of them have been sexually, physically, mentally, emotionally abused, probably almost every single one would stand up. And if you ask men the same question, yes, there absolutely would be men who have gone through that as well. But there wouldn't be anywhere near as many, because men could walk anywhere pretty much in the world and not have to worry for their lives, for their being sexually abused by violent men. And that's a whole nother venue and topic. But yeah, I'd like to know where that comes from.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Waska, and I can also see the flip side, like where Pete is coming from. I definitely see all of the ways that women are needing to stand for their rights or have been dominated and put down or abused in different ways. And yet I also know that there are so many women, especially in the Western world, that have become so masculine that their energies too. So to me, this is a healing conversation, not about something being wrong with men necessarily, as much as it is about the communication that needs to happen so the two sides can understand each other. And I believe we've got another comment from another listener. So let's see what he has to say.
What exactly do you guys mean by man healing?
Why don't you take that one, Waska?
Sure. I don't know if we use that terminology, but I would say in the work that I do with guys, we get into a safe and sacred space. And to me, man healing is being able to be vulnerable with your brothers. I mean, I don't know about you, bro. I've had and have and probably will have friends who just really don't feel safe, no matter what the space is, to open up and really share their feelings and be in a place where you could have brothers who will sit there and listen, not judge, not try to fix you, and support what you're going through and relate to what you're going through. Because most of us are going through the same thing. So I think the healing begins there, is having a safe and sacred space to be able to sit in circle with your brothers and be heard and be felt. That's the way I would start that conversation.
And I think, healing has a lot to do with creating the balance, because there has been this imbalance of masculine and feminine energies, both in the outer world. And that is simply a reflection of what's going on internally inside each one of us, because we each have a masculine side and a feminine side. And I think in the case of how men were reared, and because men have been the ones that have had to go to war, men have been the ones that always have felt like they've had to take care of their families, they've been the hunters and the gatherers, they naturally have leaned more in a certain direction. But I think both men and women have leaned toward the shadow side of ourselves. And we're now in a time and a space in history where it requires that radical honesty for each of us to look at ourselves individually and understand the shadow nature and how we can create more of a balance between a healthy masculine and feminine, both on the internal as well as the external.
The wage gap has nothing to do with men and women. It has everything to do with the corporation. If the corporation is not paying women the exact same amount that they're paying men that are doing the exact same job, it has nothing to do with men and women in society. It has everything to do with the corporation. So that's one thing that we actually need to touch base on. Okay, who's in charge of the pay scale? Who's in charge of the wage gap when it comes to that corporation, that industry that they're actually in? And another thing is that men, we get a lot of bad reps. We don't necessarily, nobody actually listens to some of the sides of our story, right? When a female starts an argument and a man walks away, but she continues to push on it, continues to push on it, and continues to push on it, and continues to push on it.
You know,
Yeah.
I hear his argument about the corporations, but for so long, men have dominated the tops of corporations. And I think that's some of the issue that women are pushing back at this time and have been for decades, because they've had to face that more male-dominated way the higher up you go in different organizations. And so women... I think part of the conversation is that it's not necessary that women are bad-mouthing or fighting against. It's more about simply trying to attain an equal footing and equal grounding to what already exists. What do you think, Waska?
Yeah, good points, Simi, and I hear what you're saying also, Pete, about being heard, and that's why it's so near and dear to my heart to recommend to any guy, find a men's group, find a circle, find a group of guys that, want to get in touch with their feelings, because that's really what it comes down to, man. We're all, in that wounded warrior, wounded child place, whether a man or woman. And in my experience, a lot of it comes down to miscommunication, unclear communication. And that's why a lot of times, because I've been there, bro, man, I'm walking away and it's like, please, let's just chill and we'll revisit this, and she's really frustrated and I'm getting angry, and that's a very common theme that happens because the communication is not there. So again, I think it's about equanimity, like what Simran was saying about feeling equal. I think we both genders, within ourselves, the sacred feminine and divine masculine, and within ourselves, as well as the physical relationships between men and women, we have to find a place of equanimity where we both feel heard. And if we're not being understood, we need to work on that, because we really do speak two different languages. So that's I think a basis of how we could start off.
Yeah, that the book by John Gray, "Men Are from Mars, Women Are from Venus." It clearly illustrates that we have different perspectives, we have different language styles. Women naturally are more emotional, and if you look at the self-help fields, you'll see that the majority of them are represented by women attending those things. Men are now starting to get into that. But I think it has a lot to do with how men have been perhaps wounded from earlier in childhood in ways that are different than the ways that women have been wounded. And I think that when these arguments take place between men and women, and there's that push from a woman, or there's that anger from a man, it really has nothing to do specifically with the moment, even though it looks like it's about a particular issue. What's being triggered is actually that childhood wound. And whenever we end up in a fight with anyone, it really is two children fighting each other rather than two healthy adults. It's two wounded children that are going at it. And so I think we can always point the finger at the other. And as we're engaging in this conversation, about men, it's not really about pointing the finger at women or pointing the finger at men. It's truly meant to be a supportive and facilitated conversation so that both men and women have a better understanding of where men are, how we can be more supportive to one another as human beings, and how we can create greater honor and respect and unity between the sexes. Because until we can come together as compatriots in relationships, we can't possibly come together in this world in a space of unity.
Good points. Good points. Yes. Interesting. You mentioned, Men Are from Mars, Women from Venus, the John Gray book. John Gray credits his wife for really filling him in on a lot of the stuff that he wrote in that book, because he simply said, he's like, I did not know that, and that was a huge part of it, the communication. And hence the title of the book, that they were communicating on two different levels. So it's like, I always think of the Charlie Brown, like, wah, 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 wah. The teachers talk like that, and you can't understand them. And that's kind of like what it is. We're talking two different languages, and it creates frustration, it creates anger, it creates resentment. And then exactly like Pete was saying, one of us moves away, the other one usually chases, and it doesn't end well, and it doesn't get resolved. So there has to be a new paradigm of how we communicate with each other, because that's really where it starts off. There's a clear communication, because so many times things are misunderstood, misread, and it creates these problems. And I'd love to hear from more guys if they want to chime in. Again, the topic is what does it mean to be a man in today's world in 2021.
In 2015, there was a study conducted stating that men actually run a higher risk of being raped more than women. So I don't see why we should even bring that up in the conversation.
Absolutely. I'm acknowledging what you're saying. Yes, men are just as susceptible. Yes, but it all has to be, resolved and talked about, and we got to find solutions for this. Those crimes are violence. It's people who are angry, who've got things pent up and things to say, things that aren't getting out. So again, it gets back to the feelings. How are you expressing your feelings? Are they being heard?
Yeah, I think about what men are facing in today's times, and like I started off in the beginning of the show saying, there are a lot of different issues. We've come through a lot of things in the last couple of years, anywhere from a lot of the things in the media where some of the darkness is coming to light that some men have perpetuated. And I think that what that does is it ends up reflecting on all men, but that is not all men. Those are certain men that are perpetuating those kinds of behaviors. And I think where other men get involved is that, are they standing by, being silent? Are they supporting women? Are they talking about it? Are they looking at their own behaviors and actions? Where is that leading? And then there's also that issue of race. We saw so many things happen and continue to happen in regard to Black men and police brutality, or the Black Lives Matter movement, or in regard to Jewish men and some of the things that are said there, and in many of the different races. And so when we look at today's time, it looks like a lot of chaos and a lot of friction that's happening. But I also feel like sometimes that rub of the friction is what creates the healing and helps us to discern, how can we move forward in a better way? How can we really start to see the issues so that these things start to disappear? And I truly believe we're headed in a very, very good direction, even despite some of the things that we're seeing taking place right now. What do you think, Waska?
Yeah. I like to, I'm all about positivity. And so what you're saying, I do support and believe that is true as well. And a lot of the negativity, if you will, again, speaking about my own life, which I know a lot of the guys have experienced this, and it's the peer pressure growing up. So you said how many guys are supporting women, how many guys are supporting even men, supporting men. I'd love for guys to chime in. How many of you guys have a group, whether it's a men's group, a church group, a spiritual, whatever it is, that you are with other guys, that you are supporting each other, you're being heard, you're able to say whatever it is that you want to say, again, in a safe and sacred space where that it's being honored and respected, and guys, brothers that truly have your back. How many of you guys actually have that? Because we joke sometimes about women, they get together and they have their little coffee clutch, but you know what, women are from what I've seen, are very much supportive of each other. They commiserate with each other. They listen to each other, and that's really important for guys as well. It's important for all of us to have our feelings and our emotions acknowledged, not just, hey, did you see the game, and not let it out and get it out, because I've said this before: emotions buried alive never die. So that peer pressure, and worrying about being unpopular or uncomfortable, whatever. So who are you guys talking to? How are you getting it out? And how do you expect your women to support you if you're not really even putting it out there in the world to your best bros?
Well, we've got the lines blowing up here. I'm going to let some of these voices be heard because there's some great things that are being said by Tio Kono and Pete G. So chime on in, guys.
I see your point, Waska, but in all honesty, it's not really, I feel like it's not something we should really just be talking to one another with. It's something that we should hold our senators, our politicians accountable, because for starters, a lot of their endorsements come from institutions such as jails. And the reason I brought up the men being raped more often than women is because men are raped in jails. All right, and men are sent to jail a lot more, or at least on a higher rate than women, even for causing the same crime. So I feel like our policies are a little skewed, and I feel like talking about it isn't really going to help anything. I feel like voting the right people into the positions of power is where we really should be looking into it.
Well, I mean, let's just get this out of the way. All right, so rape is not a crime. Most of the time, rape is not a crime of sex. It's an act of dominance. All right, it's an act of power. It's an act of sometimes rage. Yes, and there are a lot of men that get raped, but I think it was either in the late 70s, early 80s, mid 80s, where they stated that if a man were to get fully erect, how could he deny the fact that he wanted it? Even though he may not want it, his organs, which were portrayed on the outside, said otherwise. So it's just not something, that's not something that it's hard to actually discuss with that type of scenario.
I think that any type of physical violence is a difficult conversation, whether it is on a man, on a woman, whether the person that the aggressor is a man or a woman. I think what it boils down to is, where is our humanity? Where is our decency? Where is the level of introspection? And also, this place of compassion and understanding. I think we live in a society where we have judged and we have been taught, that what's right and what's wrong, and put these people away and forget about them, or these acts of violence have been done. And as horrific as some of those things are, I think there need to be some conversations about what's at the very core of that violence, and what's at the core of our society, and how are we supporting the young men? How are we supporting our young boys? What do we need to do? How do men need to support the mothers? How do mothers need to support the fathers? It's an entire conversation about really looking again at who we've been and who we want to be going forward. I think the pandemic gave us an opportunity to really be with ourselves and be with those around us. I think there was a surge even in domestic violence because of the pandemic and the quarantine, and it's really brought to light a lot of the repressed anger and the emotions that existing inside. And I think that that's why you're wanting to facilitate these conversations, Waska, is to help men and women understand what's going on within us, so that we can start to deal with some of the emotions that are there and really step into higher levels of emotional intimacy with ourselves, because that is the only way we're really going to alleviate some of the problems that we're seeing. We can discuss all of these issues all day long, but unless we get to the roots of these issues, nothing will ever change.
Yes. Totally concur with that. And also, with what the other brothers are saying, about holding senators and the people we vote in accountable. In some of the ancient tribes, not even that ancient, when they would have someone in the village that was found guilty of rape or murder or theft or any other crime, violent crimes, whatever it was, rather than enslave them and imprison them, the whole village would get together and do the opposite. They would totally support them. They would figure out what happened, what went wrong, why is this person being violent, why are they stealing, did they need food for their family, whatever it was. And from what I've read and the things that I've heard about that model, it works a lot better than incarcerating, where these violent acts of rape and other things happen, because the recidivism happens because there is no support. There is no um, uh, really looking at the core of who the person is that did this crime. Okay, so what if we went back to that kind of model? And that speaks to also what like Tio Kono and Pete was saying. We wouldn't have to be so concerned with voting in the right people, because we would have the core beliefs. We would have, as Simran was saying, start with the introspection and the compassion, and it wouldn't just be all rhetoric and talk. We would have a village, so to speak, of warriors, of illuminated warriors who protected the women, who protected the children, who were, everyone was educated. We were all on, so to speak, the same page of respecting one another, communicating with one another, and making sure we were all elevated, and there was equanimity amongst all people. And that's what we're not seeing, and that speaks to a lot of the things that we're touching upon here. There is no equanimity between the races, between the genders, between social classes, and that, I really think, is a large part of where a lot of these issues are stemming from. And I think we can find a place to maybe it does start with the conversation, but then actually do the work that's required to bring us to a higher level of equanimity. So what do you think
Doing the
about
work.
To be honest, I don't think the problem is that people don't talk enough. I feel like our problem is people don't look into the people that they're voting into positions of power enough. I'm not really talking about Trump either, because honestly, I hold Biden and Trump at the same level. They're both horrible for our country. Biden, not so much as Trump, but they're both basically the same coin, different side.
So when a man walks into a graveyard full of men who don't feel appreciated, those are words that are spoken only in the graveyard. They're just a bunch of whispers, sometimes just like overshadowed by society and the standards, right? So like, yeah, you can go ahead and go in with your groups, your anonymous groups, any type of male group, but there's nothing there in society that actually supports men. How are we actually getting supported here? Who supports us? And any of the things, the endeavors we do, like, I don't care about, the wage and scales of the indifferences or whatever, but, when a man is wronged, who supports us? They always look to the other person. They always look to the woman, to support the woman prior to knowing what the man's story is.
I think the first thing that has to change is, we live in a culture that is looking for someone else to do something for us. And that is a really subtle victimhood stance. We have to start to do what's internal first. We have to self-empower and realize the places that we can stand up, that we can show our light, that we can bring to the world what it is that we are wanting from the world. They say you teach what you need to heal. And that might be the way that, the new earth, the new human actually moves towards a capacity of creativity around the very issue that they're dealing with, rather than seeking to be rescued. And that would be men or women. And I totally hear you, Pete, in terms of, who's there to support the men and what programs support the men. But again, to me, it's all about alignment. It's about stepping into a place of mastery where women start to line up. They step out of their shadow feminine and masculine. They start to realize their manipulations, their shadows, their ways of dominance, their ways of slipping in there and taking what they want rather than listening and also participating in the conversations, because we have that issue within the female culture as well. And the same for men. I think they need to look at either where they're holding back and withholding or being quiet, not doing their work, or whether they're overly dominant, trying to overcompensate for what they feel inside, and bring to the table the vulnerability and the intimacy and the words. Like I've always said to my young child, use your words. Let me know what you're feeling. Let me understand where you are. Because if I can't understand where you are, there's no place for me to meet you. And I think that's the biggest thing is, can we move into 2021 in a way that men and women start really speaking how they're feeling on an intimate, vulnerable level, but then on the flip side of that, also truly listening to the words, listening to the energy, listening to the body language, completely listening to what the other is saying without the need to respond back so quickly, but to really absorb that and take that in so that the other person feels seen, heard, and acknowledged. And what I'm hearing from Pete and Tio, and I'm sure many other men that are listening and many men that I encounter, is they really want to be seen, heard, and acknowledged, equally to what women want. And when we are able to start doing that, I think that's when men will truly feel like a healing is occurring, or that an empowerment or that an understanding is occurring that really embraces them for all of who they are, rather than the projections that are often placed upon them. What are your thoughts, Waska?
Yeah, great points. And I do believe that it is all about empowering ourselves. And when we empower ourselves, like we do in the men's circle, because if you haven't been, and I'd like to hear, Pete, if you've been in a men's circle. I'm not saying that you haven't been, but I really don't hear the growth that comes out of, and I'm really not even speaking a lot about what goes on. So it's just in short, when you empower yourself through being supported by other brothers who can totally relate to what you're saying, okay, eventually what happens, you elevate your consciousness, and it's really, everything stems from your mindset. So when you have a mindset that you are powerful, okay, not forceful, there's a difference between power and force, but you are powerful and you are abundant and you are creative and you are connected, and very importantly, you are responsible, because each of us is responsible for our words, our thoughts, our deeds. And that's really where it comes down to. And before you know it, then you're doing service work and you're out there in the community and you're rising, to your highest and best self, and you're raising up others. And that's really what it's all about. And that is from starting off with empowering ourselves. And it's very much doable. It is like what Simran's saying, we all want to be seen, we all want to be heard, we all want to be acknowledged. And when we're not, whether we really see that happening or not, that's where the resentments and the anger and the frustration come out. So, I could only speak to my experience and all the guys that I worked with before. When you have some brothers there supporting you, and it's the same with women, when you have a community, a village supporting, and helping raise each other up on their shoulders, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Yes. Yeah.
Look at the same thing, like when a man and a woman had decided to, have a baby, right? I think it was in 2019 where they actually decided to let the man actually have more weeks with the mother and the child. Prior to that, it was, maybe 2 weeks? I think they gave maybe a month. So there is absolutely no relation that you can develop within a month, but a mother can get so many months off, much more than a man can. So, I think that there needs to be equal treatment across the board. If a woman gives birth to a child and they're both and they're married, or they're both they're the mother and their father, they should have the exact same amount of time off together, covered. But it doesn't happen that way.
I think those are societal changes that will come along. I know in Canada, they actually do that. They give both the mother and the father maternal, paternal leave. So they give it for those. And I think those are things that are societal changes. And when we have something that we are inspired by or we really want, that's where the creative force, the power of the solar plexus, the inspiration of the soul can come forward and help to bring that forward. And so, I can hear your passion around that, Pete. And if that's something that you are passionate about, perhaps that is some of your soul dharma to help initiate some of this equality that you feel is lacking for men. And I think that that's just as valid as women that are fighting for the rights that they desire to see in the world.
Yeah, and how do we get things changed? If we band together, we can get some of these things changed. Like Tio was saying earlier, holding people accountable for it and voting. Yes, that all works. When you have a group of people, men, women, everyone together, with these ideas, and we put them into action. Really, it only takes one footstep to start the 1,000-mile journey. So, it starts with the idea. So I'm all for that. So I think it's a matter of being proactive, and yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. Absolutely, on both sides of the fence, there's absolutely a lot of work to be done. And you touched upon this earlier, Simi. It's I think looking at the shadow self for both men and women, and really getting in touch with what's going on within ourselves. Where are our blocks? What's keeping us in the same old stories and the same old patterns year after year after year, and what do we need to do to get out of that space? How do we move forward? How do we create a new paradigm, and instead of just looking at the same thing happening over and over and over again? We have the power. I really believe we have the power. Yeah.
And I'm not plugging it necessarily, but MGTOW is kind of magnetic for that, right? Like there's just simple things that people can adhere to in terms of behavior between the sexes.
Hey guys, just popped into the show. Thank you, Waska and Simran, for this wonderful topic of discussion. I think I may have missed some. I just came in here, but I loved, Simran, what you said about how we need to start listening more to people and be vulnerable. And I think you mentioned something about how a lot of times some of the problems we want to solve is usually personal. It's because we've experienced it, right? That itself is a therapy for us. So I just wanted to touch on that point. Very small little bit about me. I am a professional musician, a music educator, a neuroscience background, and practicing Hindu, believing in the power of ancient wisdom in modern life. Very passionate about mental health. Simran, you sound like you're from the South Asian community. I'm also an Indian American here in the States, and I've seen how stigmatized that is and how many people have suffered, my relatives, etc. What do you guys think about tackling that? And is that something you've also seen during your time in your communities? Do you still feel like it's a big problem we're seeing in our society today, whether it's a stigma, amount of people that either don't listen, don't understand, that don't feel comfortable being vulnerable, that feel shame seeking help, and the universality of mental health and how we all deal with our own issues, how we all need people, how we all need social connection, how we all need to be vulnerable with one another to help empower ourselves. I wanted to get y'all's perspective on what you guys see as the scene of mental health in the world right now, especially with the pandemic and so many problems we're seeing. And if you guys are interested in any of the topics I mentioned previously, give me a follow. Would love to do a show with either of y'all individually. And once again, gratitude and love to both of you guys for putting out positive vibes into this ecosystem and just having a wonderful conversation about very relevant topics. So thanks again.
Thank you, Urban Monk. That was awesome. I loved what you shared. I do believe that the listening space is highly valuable, and to really take the time to listen to all of these conversations and topics and delve inside. It's through our meeting of the minds and meeting of the hearts that we are going to discover that commonality. And when it comes to mental health, this may sound, a little comical, because it is, but we're all a little bit insane. We're all dysfunctional. We all came from dysfunctional families. We all came from wounding. And if we can first admit that, if we can admit, that we've got our own prejudices and our own dysfunction and our own crazy going on, and be able to laugh at ourselves about it, I think that even just that little bit of humor can break the ice a little bit for us to relax enough to start to have the heavy conversations. Enlightenment really is about being light, and that doesn't mean that we can't talk about the heavy, dark subjects. It just means that we understand that there's a reality that is far beyond this illusion. And if we can stay in that place while tackling the world, I think that's what they meant when they said being in the world and not of it. It's a really powerful place to be able to span outward and look at the big picture while we also take on the identity and the lens of the smaller self and try to tackle that from that place. But every once in a while, we've got to take that breath and scope out and really listen from the greater beingness that we all are. Otherwise, we're just really playing games caught in an illusion that we'll keep spinning stories and spinning wounding and not really get anywhere. It is the hamster on the wheel for the human being. What are your thoughts on that, Waska?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, some very, very good points, and thanks, Urban Monk, for sharing your thoughts on that. Yeah, I think it really all comes down to we take everything personally, and it really is the things that really tweak us. They're mirrors. They're mirrors. I mean, with the issues that are going on with other people are really almost exclusively the same thing that's happening with us. And we take these things personally, and it's really not even about us a lot of times. And if we could actually stop and see other in self, all of these things would be diffused, because really we all just like the Buddhist way, we all want to avoid suffering, and we all want to be happy. So when we get tweaked because of what somebody else is saying or doing, it's a mirror for us to look at ourselves and say, hey, why is that tweaking me? Why am I upset about that? Because we could really, we were not necessarily acknowledging it in the moment, but we can relate to what the other person is saying, what they're feeling, what they're going through, and it hurts us. So if we could see other in self, and we really are all one, I think that would be a really great place to start. And I think I've spoke about this gentleman, this Baha'i gentleman that I was interviewing years ago, and he said that if we were all deaf, dumb, and blind, like if we couldn't see each other and if we couldn't hear each other, so there wouldn't be that initial judgment and prejudice that often comes with seeing the color of someone's skin, hearing the twang in their voice, or whatever it is that we all do it. Even the Dalai Lama has said he judges because it's a humanistic trait. So what would it look like? Okay, what would it feel like if we didn't have that stimulus to make a decision? And and he said the only way we would know is by each other's hearts. And that's true. If we could actually just, it's like the Who, Pete Townshend's rock opera Tommy. It's a deaf, dumb, and blind boy. Everybody wanted to follow him because they thought he had all the answers, that he was enlightened, that he knew the true essence of life, when in reality he wasn't judging. He didn't have that external stimulus to judge others. So for me, it's about seeing other and self is a really great lesson and great place to start.
That's why I wrote my first book, Conversations with the Universe, because I really started to look at the world and everyone and everything that I met as a mirror of me. And so whether it was an angry grocery store clerk or whether it was someone that I admired on stage, I would ask myself 5 questions. And the first one was, where is that in me? If I'm seeing anger, it has to exist in me. Otherwise, I wouldn't attract it to being in front of me. Or if I'm seeing someone that I truly admire, where's that in me, so that I can recognize that I too have that brilliance. And when we start to see the other as self, whether it is an experience, a person, a situation, an act of war, then all of a sudden we realize I'm participating, but I'm also co-creating this, because our minds together create this world, and that creates collective consciousness, which then outpictures as the many stories that we have going on the planet. And that's when I think we can step into a place of really starting to take responsibility and do the healing work. That was how I did my own personal growth and self-realization. I would ask, where is that in me? What is it here to teach me about me? What is it here to inspire from within me? And my own list of questions that I talk about in Conversations with the Universe. Robert Augustus Masters, who's written 14, 15 books on men and women, says that masculine feminine classification is based on the assumption that maleness and femaleness are opposites, like light and dark, high and low, introversion and extroversion. Part of the difficulty of categorizing various qualities and principles as belonging to either the feminine or the masculine is that femininity and masculinity aren't really opposites. They don't offer the clear contrast that the other oppositional pairings like rising and falling or positive and negative offer. So there is enough overlap between them, enough common ground to justify conceiving of them not as opposites, but as dance partners with sufficient differences to generate a mutual magnetism. I find that to be really, really powerful, according to what Dr. Masters said.
Yeah, wow, that's such a great point. It's I think it's like what the Buddha said under the Bodhi tree. He's like, I'm awake. He's aware, and I think that's what I'm hearing you say, and a lot of what Master says. It really is just acknowledging and being present and being awake and aware to what's going on around us, and not taking, not being judgmental, and holding the space for not just ourselves but the others around us. And you were talking about like listening more than speaking, which is a art. It's a talent. It's a very difficult thing for most of us to do, but it's when we do that, we open up that space for things to actually grow and develop. Just being in that sacred space of just being and being silent and listening and being present to somebody else, which is something I know you know a lot about. Yeah.
Well, there's so many levels to listening because, we kind of are taught to listen with our ears, and that's only one part of it. And, many people, what comes out of their mouths is not really what they're thinking or what their energy is actually saying. And so the more we tap into our own emotional intelligence, the more we embrace our own dark sides as well as our light, we are privy then to the subtleties of energy. We start to hear something that is in the space between the words. We start to hear an undercurrent that is going on inside of that person. We start to be able to sense an environment and really discern a language that's taking place that is well beyond what the ears can handle. And I think that we are starting to see more and more men do the inner work and tap in to their feminine side that is that intuitive nature, that is that emotionally intelligent side, that is the part of themselves that will access the subtleties of the world. And when men access that subtlety, all of a sudden they create a balance where they realize they don't have to work as hard, they begin to work smarter. And I think that one of the big issues is that men are equally as tired as women. They have their own exhaustion that they have to do because for so long in history it's always been about the man carrying the burden or carrying the weight or being the breadwinner and all of those things. And that in itself, it keeps us unconscious because if we're always working, if we're always striving, if we're always trying to hustle, then we never have the space to stop enough to, number one, listen to the world around us, much less to the world that's going on inside. And then we can't tap into the heightened energy of essence to utilize energy in a way that draws to us what we want rather than using muscle to get what we want.
Such good point. So guys, if you're vibing and hearing what Simran is saying, now this comes from a massive amount of inner work and experience that she's speaking, and she's speaking from experiential things that happen in her life that's brought her to this place of equanimity, which it's, I think if we all put ourselves out there and strive to really feel and allow these things to reach us deeply and to see the connections in our life, because really I don't believe there really are the coincidences that a lot of people call coincidences. Some people call them synchronicities. The universe, as you were saying, Simi, in your book, Conversations with the Universe, there's so many signs and symbols out there all the time. And I love when I hear people say like, oh, wow, I can't believe this dude just called me. I was just thinking about him, Well, of course he just called you because he felt it, whether he knows it or not consciously, he felt the energy. And I mean, I'm sure we've all had those experiences where things actually happen for, not to us, because the energy is out there. And energy follows thought. We know that it is scientific. So that's why I say it's so important to be positive and stay positive, even when things are looking the grimmest. Positivity rules. So that's how we attract the things that we really want into our lives. And I've had guys say, "Oh, that's bullshit," and like, it's easy to say, and blah blah blah. But you know what? One dude in particular who's been with the group for years now. I mean, he was ready to commit suicide, and everything was going wrong, and he had a victim mentality, and granted, things were very challenging in his life, but he was blaming his ex-wife for this, and he was codependent with his kids, and he couldn't get this job because this guy did this to me, and I just said, dude, he just be positive, start being positive. I gave him a few things to do. Anyway, long story short, after a bit of time, he's like, Waska, I don't know how this is actually even working, but and I never liked the saying fake it till you make it, but I said, dude, fake it till you make it. Just do it. Just say positive affirmations. Do something positive for yourself every day. Do something positive for somebody else every day. And it slowly did work to recreate, neural pathways in his brain that actually told him, hey, you know what, life is pretty darn good. I've got a lot to be thankful for. I have a lot to be grateful for. And, so I really always go back to that positivity. Things could always be worse. There's always people who have bigger challenges, tougher, there's always something to be grateful for, so positivity and gratitude are like my two key go-tos, that always bring good things.
One
Thoughts on
step after the other, right? One step
I'm
after.
so happy to hear someone as wise as Simi there just say that a process of grounding is first. I'm so with that.
I hope. Yeah.
Hey guys, thank you so much for your response to the last question I had posed, or I guess discussion, input about mental health. Appreciate it. Just wanted to ask you, Simran, if you don't mind. I'm not too familiar with your background, but based on what I've heard you saying so far, would love to know if you could elaborate a little bit more on your background, on how you kind of got to where you are now, spiritually or otherwise. Was it like a spiritual experience or realization? Was it through some sort of trauma or difficulty you had in your life? Was it some failure you experienced? Was it just natural, something experiential? Like, how was that inner process like for you? Like, what was it that happened in your life that kind of made you get into the space you are in now? If you're comfortable sharing that, if you'd like to get into it.
Very intuitive.
Absolutely, Urban Monk. I will answer that question. I'm going to let one more question come through, and then I will respond to that. Thank you.
I think the idea of staying positive can be misleading for a lot of people. I think a more accurate definition of what it is you're trying to say is that it's really important that men and women are able to just be with their emotions and not let their emotions get the better of them.
Great point, Ari Bing. Yeah, and that touches on where I would go to answer the question for Urban Monk. I like to really tell people that enlightenment is attainable by any person, wherever they are, whatever status, whatever experience you're going through, because that is what I've lived. I wanted to just figure life out, and I talk about it in my 3 books. Because I figured out certain things that helped me to understand a bit of how life works. But to do that meant to really dive into experience. And 2 things that I often say is, you are not on a journey, you are the journey. And the other thing that I constantly say is that you are experiencing itself. And I live by that philosophy. So whatever I encounter, I recognize that it is experience, and it's inviting me to go deeper. And so if I encounter an experience of darkness, I commit fully to immersing myself into that space to feel the juice of everything that it's bringing. And what I've discovered is that emotions are just like colors of a crayon box. They are simply different shades of us, and that if we are willing to embrace them and own them, then all of a sudden we absorb parts of ourselves that we have made separate. And by absorbing those parts, we become whole. We become more compassionate. We become more understanding. And then we're able to see the world in a much bigger place. I've never considered myself a teacher or a coach. I love writing, and I believe we're each here to be an example. And so I write, and in my 3 books, I talk about that pathway of discovering yourself through the world around you. And that's what Conversations with the Universe is about. It's the signs, symbols, and synchronicities and how the world speaks to us. And then my second book is Your Journey to Enlightenment. And it's all about conditioning and how we've conformed to life rather than being the curious, the wondrous, the innocent, the divine child that we initially came in as. That is about becoming our own soulmate, really understanding that only when we embrace the shadow, the demon, the monster inside, and really understand that it came here or developed in order to lead us to our highest and best selves, we truly do live the epic hero's journey that we were intended to live. So my knowledge comes through experience. I believe that is the best way to personally grow and understand. Otherwise, it's just heady intellectual knowledge, and there's never a sense of fulfillment when you really look at life. And so I invite everyone to dive deeply into feeling, to use the positivity to help lift you up and out when you need to, but to not use it as an escape mechanism, to really allow yourself to immerse into the murky waters, because the lotus flowers out of the mud, and we're all here to be flowering lotus. So and I think we are heading towards the end of our show. Waska, is there any closing things that you want to say before we wind up this evening? I'm so thrilled we had so much participation and such amazing comments from so many beautiful men. It shows the intelligence, the sensitivity, and the beauty that is out there in men. And that's what I want to really help other women and men see, is that we have an amazing world of incredible human beings, men and women, that are here to grow and prosper and expand with one another.
Amen to that. Yeah. Wow. Well, I will first say that my heart is very happy. Thank you, Simran, for your beautiful wisdom ways, sharing your stories and experiences and moderating so eloquently. I'm very grateful for that. And for all the gentlemen that chimed in, thank you guys for being part of the conversation. It was very beautiful and it's very important as well. And if you guys are into checking out the Way of the Illuminated Warrior Transformational Men's Community, it is, like Simran was saying, it's all about experiences. It is experiential. I mean, now with COVID, we are doing a lot of telecircles, because obviously, we will have retreats again, but it's, we got to be COVID safe. But, that's my mission and vision, really, is to empower men, however that needs to look, through my experiences as well, and to be there, his brothers, and to share the circle, to share feelings, and to just support one another. So I'm here for that. You guys could connect with me if you go to illuminatedwarrior.com. I'm reachable through there. And once again, thank you guys, and thank you, Simran. I look forward to our next time together. Yeah, it was very beautiful. Aho.
Absolutely. Thank you, Waska. If you'd like to find out more about the work that I do with 1111 Magazine and 1111 Talk Radio, those are free resources. Just go to 1111mag.com and check out anything there and allow yourself to receive it, and then to discover my own artwork and other things that I personally do. You can go to IamSimran.com.
Visit IlluminatedWarrior.com if you'd like to go deeper and find out more about what's available within the Illuminated Warrior Men's Transformational Community. Tune in next time for more candid conversations for men and women about men on the Way of the Illuminated Warrior Talk Show every Thursday at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. Until next time, illuminate your path with loving kindness.